Can Jonah Coleman run wild on Washington State again?
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's the site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate GM. Ultimate College Football HC is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. Begin your coaching legacy today. Lars, we got a really fun show for the Everydayers today. We're going to talk about just the meaning behind the Apple Cup after talking to Carson Bruner and Denzel Boston today. And, some of the things that they had to say about the Apple Cup. We're going to talk about some comments that were made on the Washington State side about Will Rogers being able to handle pressure, which were interesting to say the least. And then we'll get there, though, because Lars, last year, Jonah Coleman in a 44-6 win for Arizona over Washington State. Jonah Coleman carried the ball 11 times, just like he did last week against Eastern Michigan. He only picked up 70 yards, though, for a very modest for Jonah Coleman, average of 6.4 yards per carry. But he scored 3 touchdowns and feels like he could end the day with a similar stat line on Saturday.
I'll take the over on yards per carry for sure. I mean, that's the one thing that Jonah has proven through 2 weeks. I mean, Jonah's proven a lot. We already know how good Jonah is. But in that vein, he's had 2 100-yard games. I would be surprised if he didn't have another 100-yard game. But at the same point, in the context of you got Cam Davis, you got Sam Adams, you got Adam Muhammad, I have to imagine Jed's going to want to get Adam Muhammad against Wazoo in this game, and probably Devon on some level too, just knowing how suspect that Wazoo run defense is. I can totally see a package of
the
Adam
run
Muhammad,
defense that's
Jonah
averaging
Coleman.
180.5 yards per game given up.
Yeah, I said suspect, right?
You said suspect. I just want to put the numbers behind it.
No, it's totally not an opinion. It's a fact. What it is. But either way, it's you don't need to have DeMond start the game. You don't need to have DeMond start the entire season. You just have those certain packages. Once Will is able to get a touchdown under his belt, I guarantee you we'll see a package of Adam Muhammad on one side, Jonah Coleman on the other, and DeMond quarterback, and just watch that happen. Just watch that for one series, see what happens. Because this Wazoo run defense, as you mentioned with those numbers, again, it's a matter of how many rushing touchdowns. It's going to be the opposite. It's going to be the antithesis of what a Jimmy Lake, Mike Leach game used to be, where rush 3, drop 8, 3 or 4 pick game, call it a wrap. No, it's going to be the exact same style, just with a completely flipped script of, hey, now we're going to stop the run. John Matu is a running quarterback who can kind of throw, but if you realize, he's more of a runner than he is a passer.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And, there were some interesting things said about that today as well that, Steve Belichick, as we talked about on yesterday's show, has spent plenty of time preparing for guys just like that. But let's talk about this running game a little more, because we spent a lot of time on what Washington can do through the air on yesterday's show, as the Everydayers know. And when I look at this ground attack, I see so much room for all these guys really to take what they want. And I feel like that's because we've seen a lot of Cougs say one thing or another in our comments, like, oh, Wazoo looked really good, which is, yeah, they certainly do. They certainly look really solid in a win over Texas Tech, but let's be real. Giving up 470 yards a game is a major problem against, especially a Jed Fish coached offense, which is really, really good at finding a weakness and attacking it relentlessly. And with this Wazoo defense, there are multiple weaknesses that can be attacked where, let's think about it from a standpoint of what we talked about yesterday with the passing attack, where it goes so far beyond what Jonah Coleman could do. Because then all of a sudden, I feel like we haven't seen a whole ton of play action just yet from this UW offense so far. And I feel like this is a game where, if Jonah Coleman gets going in that first quarter, man, where we haven't seen a fast start from this offense just yet. But if Jonah Coleman gets going early and all of a sudden the second quarter, there's a whole bunch of play action, I'm not in the business of making game predictions, but that might not look so great for this Coug secondary.
Well, let's clear the air for a second here. You are in the business of making score predictions. You just choose not to, and I'm okay.
No,
with
I don't choose not to. The everydayers know what time the last score prediction I made was, and I vowed to never do it again after that Montana game. Never again.
I mean, I think we all predicted Washington to win that game, but I see your point. And to me, what's telling is the week 1 rushing yard stats that Portland State put up.
Yeah.
48 rushing attempts, 215 yards on the ground to Portland State, not to Penn State, not to Pitt State,
right?
Portland State. If Jonah Coleman and Adam Muhammad and Cam Davis and Sam Adams, and I'm going to throw Will Rogers into this equation too, and Damon, if they cannot get over 150, there is a problem.
I disagree with that slightly. They could throw the ball 40 times, as I predicted on last week's show. But no, you're absolutely right.
I was going to say, well, I think in a normal Wazoo Apple Cup game, they would throw the ball 40 times. Honestly, Will hasn't thrown the ball over 30. So the fact that
26 in both.
And I think, I mean, obviously he can, no question. We'll get to that in the second segment. But the thing about this is, and not to correct me on the first act, because technically, yes, they have not started fast, aside from Quentin Moore taking away Jonah Coleman's 44-yard touchdown run in the opener.
True.
So, and Quentin's not going to play on Saturday, more likely than not confirming that, but just safe bet.
Jed Fish ruled him doubtful. We know what doubtful means in the NFL.
Right, because the Durfee is questionable, right?
Yeah.
So doubtful, not playing. Okay, cool. So maybe they do start fast. I'm not saying it's on Quentin. It's not a shot at Quentin. Just, maybe they are able to. But here's the thing. The reason why I say that is because if they're going to start fast, it's going to be on the ground. And that's what it's been with Jed everywhere he's been, which is use the run to set it. Again, he's got a great passing game. He's knows how to scheme open a passing attack. But everything starts with establishing the run, because then it allows your quarterback to do more things and have more, because the defense is now thinking, okay, we got to run. They're going to bring in the box, and then you go over the top. We haven't necessarily seen the full offense this weekend. I think with a strong rushing attack to open, we might see a more full offense, and we'll actually get over 30.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about with play action, where if there's going to be a whole lot more of that, that's really going to just help open up the playbook in so many different ways, where we talk about all the motions we've seen in the first couple of weeks, where with jet sweeps and different little things like that, where I think there's going to be a lot more of that in the playbook, going forward. Just there's more of that than we've seen. And, with not even guys like the starters, like Giles Jackson, like Denzel Boston being the guys in motion. If you want to throw in Audric Harris, who's a nice little deep threat, if you want to throw in somebody like Rashid Williams, there are ways to do it with everybody on this roster. And I'm really curious to see what that looks like. And we know if they want to line up and run the ball down Wazoo's throat, that's certainly an approach that they'd be well suited to take with the guys that we've mentioned, with Jonah Coleman especially. And I know we got a comment on Twitter the other day saying, if UW doesn't give the ball to Jonah Coleman 25 times a game, they're idiots. We're going to refrain from the first part there, but they don't have to. They don't have to, is the thing with this whole rushing attack. Yeah, Jonah has a frame and a style that can support 25 carries a game is the best way to say it. But with this entire rushing attack, he doesn't have to. And I feel like he showed that the last time he played Washington State. And, with the same coaching staff over there, the same scheme, there are certainly ways that Jed and his coaching staff already know how it worked last time and how they feel that Wazoo might adjust to that, and then they're going to counter. So I'm really excited to see what this looks like. And Lars, we have to talk about Will Rogers in the passing game and just things that were said about him handling pressure. Right after a message from our friends over at Ultimate College Football HC. Hey, Locked On Huskies fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up about a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love just as much as I do, Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of the Huskies? From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love about the game. You're responsible for calling offensive plays during the season, And your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football HC is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have the special offer for Locked On Huskies fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk to get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. We've also got a message from our good friends over at Game Time, because Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets, which is fantastic news for any Husky fans who've seen the ticket prices for this game at Lumen Field in this Apple Cup and have said, hey, that might be too expensive for me, because I got great news for you. Game Time is the best place to go look, because Game Time has things like all-in pricing, where if you toggle this feature, it shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. And Game Time ticket prices, they actually go down the closer it gets to kickoff, which is really, really helpful. And you get seat views. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Lars, this is an interesting one. Let me caveat this right now, because I had Cougs in my mentions saying he was talking about this season. Wazoo safety Tyson Durant spoke to the media today, and he said, and I'm quoting him here, "I know he hasn't faced anyone near the D line we have over here. So if we get some pressure on him, I think he's going to struggle." Brennan Carroll was asked about that today. Brennan Carroll said, "Yeah, any quarterback under pressure is going to struggle at points. Like that's just part of it. But also, it goes so far beyond this. Will Rogers in his career has played Alabama 3 times. He's played Georgia twice. From when Will Rogers started his career at Mississippi State in 2020, since that point, 11 defensive linemen from those two schools have been taken on day 1 and day 2 of the NFL draft. That includes top 10 pick Jalen Carter. That includes top 10 pick Will Anderson. That includes top 10 pick Jordan Davis. That includes first-round pick Dallas Turner." Where, I mean this with all due respect, if Will Rogers showed that he can handle the pressure, and yeah, his record in those games against Georgia and Alabama is not great, but the fact that he has that experience, the fact that he has seen what that looks like, is fantastic experience that cannot be discounted in this game.
Yeah, I'm just going through the game logs here. I'm looking, 4-sack game by Alabama, 5-sack game by Auburn in 22. I'm pretty sure Will's faced some pretty darn good defensive lines in the SEC. Just an odd. I mean, and here's the thing.
I respect the gamesmanship. I'll say that. The gamesmanship I respect.
No, absolutely. Well, first of all, I mean, again, it's rivalry week. What else are you going to say? You throw some bulletin board material out there. It's not a bad comment. He's not saying Will Rogers is a bad quarterback. He's not saying Will can't handle the pressure or whatever.
Right.
It's more or less. It's honestly, you know what it is. And I'll say this as somebody who went to school on the east side of the state. It's about a mentality for them more so. It's more about them than it is about Washington. It's more common about them than it is about Will Rogers, because when they're saying that, when the Wazoo player is saying that, it's saying, hey, we believe we have a good defensive front that Will has never seen, or at least hasn't seen, I guess, in this case, this year, which, yeah, no doubt. Great. You have a better defensive front than Weber State and at Eastern Michigan?
Yeah.
All right, cool. I mean, Eastern Michigan had a decent pass rush that didn't do anything against Washington, so if you want to try, go for it. But we heard the same thing about Michigan State 2 years ago.
Sure.
And that did not come to fruition. So it doesn't.
That was a different offensive line, too.
No, right, but my point is, there's always teams that'll say, "Hey, we're coming in with a good pass rush, coming in with this. These guys haven't seen this before, haven't experienced this talent level before." And whether it's hype or legitimacy, it's more so gamesmanship, like you said. But to me, the comment was more about Wazoo than it was actually Will, because if you were to unpack that legitimately, Will's been sacked 20 plus times, at least 2 or 3 seasons in the SEC when he was at Mississippi State. He's faced really good. If DeMond's starting at quarterback, fair comment. Absolutely. Totally straight. But otherwise, the way I read that comment was more so about Wazoo than it was anything about Will, because it didn't track if it was about Will. Because, okay, yeah, they haven't seen a defense like Wazoo. Well, Washington beat Washington State last year.
Yeah.
Granted, different chapter, different everything, but like nothing has changed that differently in Jake Dicker's defense. It's not like you have a brand new head coach, a brand new defensive scheme. Nothing is different in that regard. There's some new players, some younger players that are over there, but to me, that was more so about Wazoo than UW.
And that's why we led with Jonah Coleman, talking about Jed Fish, who have seen this defense before and know what it looks like. So that's one thing. And yeah, like I said, there's certainly going to be some adjustments, but and you're absolutely right. I certainly agree with you that that's probably what he meant by that and talking about Wazoo and those different things. But this is why you brought in Will Rogers, where if a team is going to say, hey, yeah, no, our pass rush is going to be able to handle him. Like this is what we do. We're going to make sure we can get after him. He hasn't seen anything like this before. This is a fifth-year senior who has over 12,000 career passing yards and 94 touchdowns in the SEC. He's top 5 in both those categories in the SEC, where, we're not going to get into the SEC means more thing, where shout out to Cal for going to Auburn and beating them. That was fantastic. But but when I look at all this, I just think this is the job that Will was brought in to do. For all the people that we've seen after Will struggled in the first quarter saying it's time for Damon, this is the job that Will was brought in to do. Come in, do your job, be serviceable, have 5 touchdowns through the first 2 games, look surgical, complete a high percentage of your passes. Maybe he hasn't thrown for 300 yards yet, but he hasn't necessarily needed to. And if the pass rush does start to get home and there are some problems, maybe you see them send some big blitzes and it overwhelms the offensive line a little bit. If there's anybody who's going to be able to solve that problem, it's going to be Will Rogers.
Not only that, so you remember the stat that I gave to you pre-show?
I do, about sack percentage, yes.
Okay, so this is about
which you should mention for the everydayers here too.
No, I will, but I want you to guess where Washington State ranks, and then I'll unpack what I told you. 134
FBS teams and sacks, So give me 127.
So they're 105 but their percentage of sacks is 1.64.
Washington on 1.64 defensive plays, right?
Yes. So their sack percentage on total defensive plays is 1.64.
Okay.
That to me, so when we're talking about pressure, I'm not seeing it. And I think even if we do see it, I don't see Will having a problem with it. Now, for Washington, as Roman said, I should unpack that question here. So sack percentages in college football through the first 2 games of the season, Washington is number 1 in the country on defense in terms of sacks compared to total defensive snaps, the percentage of sacks as a result of total defensive plays. Washington State's 105 with a 1.64 percentage.
Let's take this a step further, where when you and I talked to Will Rogers after the mock game, Washington's mock game that I held on August 17th, one of the things that Will Rogers said to us was, I'm really glad I don't have to prepare for this defense anymore, and we're going to start getting into the game planning aspects of things. And part of that was because some of the stunts, some of the blitzes, some of the different looks that Steve Belichick's defense threw at him, he said, yeah, that was tougher than anything I've seen in 4 years of college football. And I'm not going to rehash what I just said about Will Rogers and where he's been and what he's seen over the course of his career. And that's something that he certainly seems to be prepared for anything. Where, yeah, for sure, when Michigan comes to town, and we're talking about Mason Graham on the show again, which scares me already, and we're 3 weeks away from that. Where that's something where, yeah, for sure, Wazoo has some talent. Wazoo has done some really, really nice things through the first couple of weeks, but giving up 470 yards per game through the first 2 weeks is something that I'm looking at and saying, until they prove otherwise, which they certainly could. And I'm going to say that right now. They certainly could show that on the field on Saturday. But until we see that on the field, it's something that needs to be proven.
Yeah. I mean, that's the nature of football. It's, you can have all the potential and talent in the world, but until you actually show it. And that's why, to lead into the perfect segment here, I think last season showed they're going to get up for this game. And I'm not saying it's not the same team, so I'm not saying it's going to be exactly the same. But the fact that national championship team barely won on a last drive field goal,
yeah,
the Apple Cup will always have meaning. But even more so this year because it's at Lumen Field.
You know what? If you had just stopped right after, and I'm keeping all this in, but if you just stopped right after the Apple Cup Lars, that meeting was going to hit the transition button. But no, that was fantastic, Lars. You're right, but we have to have the conversation. Will the Apple Cup have the same meaning going forward? Which we'll get to right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5, get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. And, as the baseball season winds down, this is the last chance, probably the last time we'll be able to talk about this. But, as much as Aaron Judge is still the AL MVP favorite, I would still put my money on Bobby Witt Jr. on the American League side. That dude has just carried the Kansas City Royals to the playoffs, and he certainly deserves a lot more love than he's getting in, just the MVP race as a whole. Guy has just had a tremendous season and looks like one of the best players in baseball. Lars, you and I were on the field at the end of the Apple Cup last year. You and I were there as the students rushed the field where, you're beating a Wazoo team that isn't necessarily its best, but for 12-0, for all the marbles, for everything, where there was so much meaning behind that. And with Wazoo still being in the Pac-12, with UW making the move to the Big Ten, this isn't just a Huskies, Cougars conversation. It's an Oregon State conversation. There are a whole lot of other schools that are, dealing with similar rivalry things. And I want to say that I still believe this game will have meaning. After talking to Carson Bruner, after talking to Denzel Boston, they said the same thing. They said, we still have friends that are over there. And for the guys from Washington, we certainly had to teach some of the guys that are new here what this all means. But I still think this is going to be a very, very important game, no matter what conference either team is playing in.
Yeah, I think there's something. It's about what I said on yesterday's show, what makes college football special is the traditions. And I know in this day and age of college football in the year 2024, a lot of those traditions are either going away or evolving / changing, just like the Apple Cup. But on some level, there's no reason. Actually, let me unpack this because I spoke to a source. I'm going to say a source because I can't reveal who it was. But they asked me, what's the sense on the Wazoo sideline? What's kind of the what's the reason for Cougs wanting to continue this? And I kind of pointed out, it's like, well, obviously Wazoo fans kind of feel disrespected. Washington going to the Big Ten, as you mentioned. There's a lot of feelings, but that's because it's an emotional rivalry, traditional game. That's what makes it mean. If they weren't pissed, then it wouldn't have meaning. If they didn't, now again, part of being pissed off and not, getting asked to pay 3x the price for a ticket doesn't necessarily help. So in terms of getting some of the logistics worked out for this game moving forward, I think is going to be key to maintaining a rivalry, because if you're going to soil and, kind of water down the rivalry and make it hard for fans of either team to attend, especially on the east side of the state, at least for this year, specifically at Lumen Field, that's what makes it kind of interesting. When it goes back to the back and forth of actually being in Pullman and at Husky Stadium, then I think it's just a weird year this year to have it. But I think when that game goes back to Pullman next year, I believe, and then UW in 26, those games will have more meaning because, as people found it already. People found it. The video that I had in 22 of Wazoo guarding the midfield logo, which I will say right now did not work. And I will be putting out video later this week with UW and Wazoo players hugging on the logo behind security. So it didn't work. It was a stupid move by Wazoo. And speaking of running on the field, when UW fans rushed the field last year, those security guards made a beeline. Like didn't even protect the coach, didn't protect any player, just went right for the midfield logo. So it was a plan all along. So there's things that have meaning in this game. Yeah, it was completely petty and unnecessary, but it's one of those things that there's always those little things in the rivalry games that always are going to have meaning.
Right. So I'm with you there. And I want to harken back to something that Jed Fish said on Monday, where he said, yeah, there's certainly ways to make it work. And obviously, there's a 5-year plan in place. So the game is extended for a while now, but he's like, yeah, Iowa State has found a way to make it work. There are other, in-state rivalries with the teams that aren't in the same conference that you find a way to make that work. And honestly, I feel that the best person to find a way to do that is Pat Chun, where when this deal was agreed to, that was still Troy Dannon at the helm. And who better to truly understand the rivalry and truly understand a way to make things work than UW's athletic director, who was previously at Wazoo for the last handful of years. So I have faith in Pat to be able to figure this out long term. And just the more that I look at this from not just a monetary perspective, where, yeah, there's certainly new fans are talking about, well, 7 home games is really important. Yeah, for sure. But does 7 home games outweigh the, once the full Big Ten media share comes in? Will that outweigh the tradition? Where that's something that will absolutely be considered. And one thing that I feel is a somewhat underrated aspect of this is the Big Ten network as a whole, where I don't know if they're necessarily going to be the team that just the broadcast team that picks up this game going forward, where, it's going to be on Peacock this year and so on and so forth. We'll see where it goes from there. But I think that that's a really underrated part of this, where the Pac-12 was terrible at a lot of things. I feel that there's one thing the Pac-12 was the absolute worst at. It was marketing fun and important things. How hard is it to, put out a couple of extra tweets, some highlight reel packages, anything to hype up this game, to hype up the fun, sometimes good-natured back and forth trash talking of what this rivalry can be. Just of all of that, there were so many different ways that could have been done. And I feel the Big Ten is really good at that, and will find a way to be like, yeah, it's time to support the Huskies and in the annual Apple Cup, and whenever Wazoo figures out their conference situation, if they want to stay in the Pac-12, we'll see. But whatever that ends up looking like, it could end up being a really, really fun annual tradition in the grand scheme of college football, which we have yet to figure out.
Yeah, what's really funny? What I would love to see is if Wazoo somehow ended up in the ACC and you have like a week 6, like instead. So Wazoo plays like let's say they play at Clemson in week 6, and UW plays at Ohio, and UW plays like at Ohio State in the same week. The next week they both meet in Dallas, so they stay on the East Coast. They both travel to Dallas and play in the AT&T Stadium and have like a hey, it's a neutral site bowl game. Like, what? Let's get real interested with this.
Let's just be clear, that will never ever happen.
No, but in a way, there's the point of which I was getting at is there's ways to market the game that the Big Ten understands that the Pac-12 flat out never did. I mean, when you were saying that, I was thinking back like, well, how could they have marketed a game that was almost a guaranteed loss for Wazoo under Chris Peterson and Mike Leach?
Sure,
you can't. And then Jimmy Lake takes over and COVID happens, so that's out. And then 21 happens, and you're not marketing that game with that coaching staff in that situation. That's not happening. So then Kalen comes back.
Sure.
Goes to wins in Pullman. That was a fun trip back from me on the east side, almost sliding through Hayek. That was fun. But and then last year. So it kind of almost was like the way the Pac-12 died didn't really allow for it to be marketed. But this is an opportunity for the Big Ten to say, hey, you know what? We're not going to bring Washington State, but we still respect your rivalry. We still respect what it means. And, that's why the Iowa State one is perfect, because Iowa's in the Big Ten, Iowa State's in the Big 12, and which is why I truly believe in the end of the day, Wazoo will end up in the Big 12. So that ACC comment was, again, just a hypothetical. There's a way to spruce things up without having to go to the nth degree. But at the same point, there's so much that, I just think this Saturday will be interesting and be telling for what could be to come in terms of the overall viewership, not the attendance, because I don't think the attendance is going to be good. It's the viewership, and being on Peacock does not help, but I don't know. I'm just curious to see what's the response after this weekend, because right now everyone's still got the vitriol. They left the Pac-12, they hated us, they shunned us, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. My opinion has always been, if you're Wazoo, this is one of 2 potential bowl games for you every single year.
Sure.
Playing Washington is a bowl game, and if you win that game, that's a marquee win for you. And if you're in, let's say you're in the Mountain West, I'm not saying they're going to, but I'm just saying, let's say you happen to be in the Mountain West, that's a Power 4 win for you that looms large at the end of the year. And so to me, there's no reason why Washington. If you take out the petty emotions and all of that, I mean, as somebody who went to Wazoo, I don't see why they shouldn't continue, and they obviously will for 5 years. But I just don't see why fans will, not care about it as much. Because again, if you beat Washington, hello, now you care.
Right. Exactly. And that's one of the biggest things about it, right? Where it's always more fun when you're winning. But I really want to see the tradition of all this continue, and I really am glad they found the short term. Where I agree, I'm really skeptical about the attendance, mainly due to the costs, and that's something where going forward, yeah, I agree. Where I think it's going to look really different. So, but that's a conversation we're going to have whenever we end up crossing that bridge. And the last thing I really want to say on this is just in terms of the overall atmosphere for the game. No matter how many people do show up at Lumen, I think it's going to be a fun atmosphere, where whoever does say, yeah, this is still really important to me, and I do want to, end up making this trip, if you want to save a couple of bucks, hey, we had our game time read a little bit earlier. You're welcome. Make sure you go check that out. But with all that being said, truly, where this is going to be a fun environment. Yeah, it's in the middle of downtown Seattle, so it's not necessarily a true neutral site for Wazoo. But when I look at this and I look at what it can be, everybody being there in one place where if you really do try, you could have a 50-50 split, but that's going to require a whole lot more effort from one side than the other. So I'm just excited, and I want to see what that atmosphere is going to be like, because if it all falls the way that I'm sure when, these discussions were had, it could look really good. But a lot of that is going to end up coming down to the attendance as a whole. And Lars, that being said, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all of your days tuning in. Thank you so much for making Locked On Huskies your first list of the day. Now go check out the Locked On College Football podcast, where our guy Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron, from NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors. He's got you covered for it all. You can go check out the link to Locked On College Football, which is in the description, so you don't need to search, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And just a heads up, we are also going to be doing a Locked On Huskies Insider exclusive Q&A this Friday. We're going to, for everybody who's over there, you do get a free 2-week trial, and after that, it's $4.99 a month. So we had so much fun doing the last one. It was almost 40 minutes. We were giving grades on every single position. And like I said, you get a free 2-week trial if you want to check that out, because that is only available to Locked On Huskies insiders. The link to that is also down in the description below. Like I said, there's so much fun that gets involved. Everything goes straight to your text message inbox. You get to chat with me and Lars one-on-one. We're dropping recruiting news, just any kind of rumors that we're hearing, game day stuff. We're dropping the injury reports over there as soon as they hit our phone. There's so many other things we're dropping over there, and it seriously, we're doing our very best to make sure this is very well worth your time. Lars, you know where the people need to go if they want to make sure they hear everything that we've got going on. They got to subscribe wherever they get their podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure you hit that like button, hit that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. You got any questions, comments, concerns, make sure you drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us 5-star reviews. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Thursday.